the final movie we have for today is the 1978 slasher classic Halloween. One night, a young boy named Michael Myers, not to be confused with the actor of the same name, he kills his sister and is locked away for many years in I think it's an insane asylum?
Yes.
So later on, as an adult, he escapes the facility just before Halloween and returns to his hometown to kill again. So even though it's not the first slasher movie ever made, it's generally regarded as the grandfather of slasher movies, I guess, as it's usually linked to or responsible for the wave of all the slasher movies that followed shortly after. It's a movie that has a fair amount of deaths, but is really more suspenseful than your typical slasher movie, and it's a very well-made film. The mask they modified or created for the movie really stands out well, and gives the character of Michael Myers a great emotionless tone. The theme music is good, though it does get a little repetitive after a while for my taste. The acting overall is decent. Jamie Lee Curtis, her performance towards the end is really good. And of course, Donald Pleasance, he does fine in his role as well, as Michael's doctor. Though there's not too many noteworthy characters outside of those two. And I didn't necessarily care too much about who lived or who died outside of those two. So normally for a slasher movie, I don't think the lack of characters that I care about would be as much of an issue for me if it was for a movie that focused a lot more on gore and violence. But because Halloween goes for more suspense, I think the lack of care that I had for most of those characters does in some small way hurt my overall enjoyment of the movie. But yeah, I think it's a very good film. For me personally, it doesn't quite stand out among most other good movies of its time and genre, though.
I would say Halloween is probably the perfect horror movie. And that's pretty much all I would need to say. Because this, not only is it a classic insofar as slashers are concerned, even if you don't know a thing about horror movies, you probably know about Halloween. It's in that very high echelon of horror, where pretty much everybody knows about it. Few movies, maybe The Exorcist, few movies can reach that point. Halloween is, in my opinion, pretty flawless. I don't have a single problem with the movie. Both the original version and then the version that has a few extra scenes in it. It doesn't matter. I think the movie is pretty fantastic. I enjoy most of the characters. I enjoy most of the performances. The theme, I think, is probably one of the best themes in the history of horror movies. The suspense the movie has is just off the charts. I don't know, it's one of those movies where I would have to struggle to give this one any type of negative outlook. I mean, I've said before, I grew up in the, 90s, early 2000s. When I was a kid, I saw this movie on TV all the time. And it's probably a combination of that nostalgic value mixed with the fact that despite a somewhat low budget for this time period, Halloween virtually blows every other movie out of the water. In my opinion, it's a pretty fantastic movie. And it's one of those movies that if for some reason you've not seen, if you don't think you'd like it, 70s horror, I would definitely recommend you see this one. And I would also ask you what the hell you're doing for having not seen it yet. Yeah, I guess, let me just I think Halloween, in my opinion, is one of the best horror movies ever made. You have movies like Child's Play that are great. You have movies like Nightmare on Elm Street. Halloween is, some people like The Shining, some people like The Exorcist. A few people think Poltergeist, but when it comes to best horror movie ever made, without a doubt, I would choose Halloween.
Yeah, no, it is a very good movie. I guess I've just seen, I only saw this movie once I was in my teen years, so kind of in the mid to late 90s. And I'd seen so many other slasher movies before it, so because it wasn't one of the earlier horror movies that I watched, it doesn't quite stick with me as much as some of those others do. And while I'm sure a lot of people genuinely do feel it is the perfect movie, and in your case that's true, I think some horror fans also let a movie's reputation help shape their opinion of a movie. So if it's generally regarded as a 10 out of 10 best slasher movie ever, or whatever you want to call it, I think some people just take that and then...
Yeah, they sort of run with it.
They're kind of influenced by that to enjoy it even more than maybe than they actually do. Yeah.
I would say I don't believe I would fall under that category, and I don't think you're saying I do. I'll just point out, I think the 1980 The Shining is a subpar movie. I think it's actually not necessarily a bad movie, but it's definitely not a great movie. And Exorcist, not a particularly great movie. Carrie, not a particularly great movie. So there's a lot of quote-unquote classic horror movies I just don't care for. So Halloween sort of transcends that. It's probably one of the few really, high-rated horror movies that I actually agree should be as highly rated as many people say it is.
There is something that kind of, I don't want to say it irks me, but it's something I question towards the beginning of the movie where Michael escapes and he drives off, and they give that kind of very loose explanation. Well, someone maybe gave him lessons. I'm thinking, I mean, what, did they let these people test drive cars or something? I mean, or even if they instructed him on how to drive a car. I mean, I don't know for you, but the first time I ever drove a car, a manual car where you actually had to change gears, and I'm guessing that's what this is, it's not easy, even if you're told how to do it. Like, you stall the car so many times when you're just learning how to drive, and he just kind of slowly drives off like he's driven plenty of times before.
Yeah, I'm of two minds of this. I've heard that supposedly Michael Myers' intelligence level is moderately high, so anytime he would be transported from one facility to another, or pretty much anytime he was in a vehicle, he would sort of be absorbent of how, to operate a vehicle. And I don't know if I buy that, but there's one possible solution. The other thing that comes to mind is the personification of Michael being evil. And, if, and a few characters have said, if Michael is this personification of evil, it probably doesn't matter if he knows how to drive a stick shift or not.
Well, we may have to ask Bill Gates what his experience was with driving stick shift, yeah.
I would say that's a reference that actually just went over my head.
Oh, well, you just said his intelligence level was probably a lot higher, and I'm guessing Bill Gates is too, so I don't know why his name came up, I just threw it out there.
Yeah, I would say to me, I can understand why that might, not necessarily annoy, but, just stand out to some people. I don't think that ever really bothered me, even once I started driving. I don't think the fact that Michael sort of jumped right into it really did, left much of a negative impression on me. Because, by that point, I'd seen this movie God knows how many times.
Yeah, I just think for me, with a slasher movie, I guess I just prefer to see more violence than what we kind of see in this movie. Even though I do enjoy suspense movies, I think movies that use a lot more suspense, they tend to have a lot less replayability for me as well. After you've seen the movie a number of times, you know what's happening, so the suspense factor, it decreases over time. At least for me it does.
Yeah, I'll say at the same time, there are two scenes that always stick with me. One scene in which, after Laurie discovers the body of one of her friends, she's walking away from the room and we see Michael behind her, and the camera sort of shifts angles, and we know Michael's behind her, but then the camera shifts angles. Now we don't see Michael, and then he just pops up. I thought that was a fantastic use of cinematography right there. Then toward the end of the movie, and this is probably one of the more famous scenes, in which Michael was stabbed with a sewing needle, hanger. It was a hanger. He just sits up, the music pops up, and in my opinion, when I see those two scenes, that's like A+ level ability right there.
Well, yeah, that scene was directed really well. I mean, even if you look like when she's hiding in the closet, yes, and you see the light peering in through those holes in the cupboard there. Yeah, that's a really good scene.
Admittedly, it is somewhat difficult for me to take a step back and try to use a critical eye on this one. Though, if I have any problem with this, maybe one be the lack of conclusion, or I guess real conclusion. Of course, we all know it, carries on into Halloween too. But as far as this movie is concerned, I can imagine some people might be annoyed with how the movie ends, even though I think it's pretty perfect. But the fact that, at least as far as this movie goes, Michael Myers is focused for no reason on some random teenage girl. And I know later movies try to explain that. But the fact that he focuses on just one individual, if you don't know any of the other movies, might seem a bit strange.
I guess it comes as no, well, I'm not going to say no surprise, but for me, the more I think about it, when I said, I'd prefer it to be more violent or gory or be more like a actual standard slasher movie, I was just thinking to myself what my favorite movie is in this series, and it's actually part 6, which I know a lot of people think is one of probably the crappier ones.
Yeah, top 3 worst ones in the series, probably.
But I think it's also one of the movies where he is the most menacing and he is the most violent, and no matter which version of it you watch, there's the theatrical version, and then there's also the producer's cut version. Both are, in my opinion, both are good. The theatrical one has this major massacre sequence in the last 15 minutes of the movie that I really enjoy. And I think Michael Myers is the scariest in that movie. The mask looks the best, and the violence it's about as violent as it is for a Halloween movie.
No, it's funny because, for me, that scene when she's looking outside her window, with Laurie Strode looking outside her window, to just see, Michael standing there. I'll be honest, that's all I need. Just a guy standing there silently. Of course, I appreciate, gory movies. I'm a big slasher fan. But some movies, in my opinion, if the suspense is done perfectly, you don't really need that much gore, which I think Halloween is probably one of the best examples of.
I really wish if someone did a parody of that scene where she sees him outside the window, amongst the sheets that are on the line, and she sees him and then looks again, and then instead of him disappearing, I wish some movie would come along and do a parody where he's actually doing his laundry. But I don't know. Yeah, I just wish they'd do that. I think I saw somewhere, might have been on YouTube, the other scene where she sees him just next to the hedge and he takes a step behind it and disappears. I'm sure I've seen a YouTube video where they do that, and then she walks... I don't know if she walks around and sees him, or if they just show him literally hiding behind it, like, cowardly. I'd have to find that again, because, anytime they can make fun of, serious scenes, whether it's this movie or any movie, it's, if they do it cleverly enough, it's always fun.
Yeah, and one other thing I do touch on, and you touch on this a little, Donald Pleasence's character is, I think, a thoroughly enjoyable, potentially unhinged guy. And as the series progresses, he becomes more and more unhinged. I always enjoy that scene where he's staked out at the Myers house and his kids come up. Oh, hey, I dare you to go to the porch. And one of the kids gets to the porch. And he's like, hey, get your ass off the porch. And his smile after he does that. And then a second later, he's terrified when the sheriff comes back. That little sequence, it's probably one of the few, a little more humorous scenes, but I always sort of like the humanization of Pleasence, Loomis's character, who is often seen as, one-track mind type guy.
The one scene where they are I think they're in the Myers house, and then just randomly out of nowhere, something smashes the window. Do we know what that was that smashed the window?
Off the top of my head, I do not.
Yeah, I never really paid too much attention to what it was, but I'm just wondering, did someone throw a rock or what? What caused that window to smash?
I also I really liked Laurie's character, the very sort of book smart but awkward teenage girl, even though she may not have looked like a teenager. I just really enjoyed her character. She has very normal concerns, like, oh my god, who do I ask to dance with me? And she's not, a complete goody two-shoes, because she also tries a little marijuana, shows that she's at least interested in living the wild side. But I really enjoy her character. And having, 3 of the main characters, Michael, Loomis, and Laurie all being good characters, that's already a really good combination.
Yeah, so for me, it is a very well-made film. I do enjoy it. I just don't enjoy it as much as some of the other great horror movies out there. Child's Play is better, obviously, in my opinion. Even A Nightmare on Elm Street I prefer over Halloween. So while I do enjoy the suspense of the movie, it's rather hard to maintain that with repeat viewings just because you know what's going to happen, so the suspense just loses its value to me outside of the first time I watched it. Because when I did first watch it, I did really enjoy it, and I still enjoy it. It just doesn't stand out over the other good slasher movies that are out there. If the characters outside of Laurie and Dr. Loomis were more enjoyable to me, maybe that would have made a difference. I'm not sure. But overall, I give the movie an 8 out of 10. The music also is really good, just a little too repetitive after a while.
Yeah, and I think my opinion's probably somewhat clear. You can name some of your favorite horror movies, The Shining from 1980 with Jack Nicholson, The Exorcist, Jaws, The Thing, The Evil Dead, Child's Play, Nightmare on Elm Street. It doesn't matter because Halloween is superior to all of them. Not to offend anybody listening, such as Chucky, but Halloween is, in my opinion, one of the perfect horror movies. Every time I've seen it, I've given it a consistent 10 out of 10. I have very few real problems with it, and it's, I think, one of the few cases in which a very well-received movie by a majority of people is actually a really decent movie. And I think it's a shame that was some newer Halloween movies, be it the Rob Zombie movies or even the 2018 Halloween movie. I think it's a shame that they sort of tried to move away from what the original did so well, which was almost no gore and just was straight suspense. And it worked amazing in Halloween, and it's never really been captured again in most of the movies I've seen. So I would give Halloween an easy 10 out of 10. And I sort of suspect that very few movies would come close to rivaling exactly how I feel about Halloween.